Ever heard the saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions? Well, sometimes the soft glow of kindness can lead us straight into a personal trap. You might be thinking, what's wrong with being kind? The answer lies not in the act itself, but in how far we stretch ourselves to maintain it. We've been taught that being kind is always the right thing to do, but what happens when kindness turns into self-sacrifice? When your yes to others becomes a no to yourself, you start crossing dangerous lines. It's like watering everyone else's garden and forgetting your own until it's dry and barren. As Oscar Wilde said, "A little sincerity is a dangerous thing, and a great deal of it is absolutely fatal." Imagine kindness becoming more about others' comfort than your own well-being. Curious to find out if your kindness has crossed over into toxic territory? Let's dive in. Hit like if this resonates and subscribe to explore the hidden traps of kindness and how to escape them. Trust me, you won't want to miss this. Lesson 1. Learn to say no without guilt. The first hidden trap of toxic kindness is an inability to say no. This might seem like a small issue at first, but over time, it can become one of the most exhausting, life-draining habits you'll ever encounter. Think about the times you've said yes to something when you really wanted to say no. Maybe you agreed to cover a shift for a colleague, even though you were already tired. Perhaps you let a friend vent about their problems for hours, despite feeling mentally drained yourself. Or maybe you agreed to take on a project you didn't have time for, just because you didn't want to disappoint someone. These small moments of yes start to add up, and before you know it, you're buried under a mountain of obligations that don't serve you. What makes saying no so difficult? For most of us, it's rooted in a deep-seated fear of disappointing others or being seen as selfish. We're conditioned to believe that a good person is one who always says yes, always shows up, and is always available. But that's a myth. You can't pour from an empty cup, and constantly saying yes is a fast track to burnout. When you don't set boundaries, you teach others that your time, energy, and well-being are secondary to their needs. Over time, this leads to resentment, exhaustion, and a sense of being overwhelmed. The truth is, saying no is a powerful form of kindness, both to yourself and others. It allows you to protect your energy, focus on what truly matters, and show up more fully when you do say yes. If you're always saying yes out of obligation or fear of disappointing others, your yes loses its meaning. But when you say yes to things that align with your values and priorities, it becomes a genuine expression of your desire to contribute. So how do you start saying no without feeling guilty? It begins with recognizing that no is not a rejection of the person asking for your help. It's simply a decision about how you're going to allocate your time and energy. You're not obligated to explain yourself or offer an elaborate excuse. A simple, "I'm not able to take this on right now," is often all that's needed. You can be firm while remaining kind, and over time, people will respect your boundaries. It's also important to practice self-compassion. The guilt you feel when saying no is often a sign that you're being too hard on yourself. You might fear that you're letting someone down or that they'll think less of you. But remember, people who truly care about you will understand that you have your own needs and limits. They'll respect your decision, and if they don't, that's a reflection of them, not you. Learning to say no is about reclaiming your autonomy. It's about recognizing that your time and energy are valuable and that you have the right to decide how to use them. This isn't selfish, it's self-preservation. When you start to say no more often, you'll notice a shift. You'll feel less overwhelmed, more in control, and more present in the moments you choose to engage in. In the end, saying no without guilt is one of the most liberating skills you can develop. It's an act of self-respect that allows you to protect your well-being while still showing up for the people and projects that matter most. And as you get more comfortable with it, you'll find that the people who truly matter in your life will respect and appreciate your boundaries. So next time you're faced with a request that doesn't align with your energy or priorities, remember, it's okay to say no. In fact, it might be the kindest thing you can do. Lesson 2. Set boundaries without apology. One of the most powerful acts of self-kindness is setting boundaries. Clear, firm, unapologetic boundaries. Yet for many people, boundaries feel like barriers to connection or acts of selfishness. The reality is quite the opposite. Boundaries are the foundation of healthy relationships, and without them, kindness becomes toxic, draining, and even harmful. Without boundaries, we end up giving too much, spreading ourselves thin, and losing sight of our own needs. Boundaries allow us to protect our emotional, mental, and physical energy, ensuring that we can give to others from a place of fullness, not exhaustion. Setting boundaries can feel uncomfortable, especially if you're used to being the yes person. You might worry that you'll hurt someone's feelings or be perceived as uncaring. But boundaries are not about building walls to shut people out. They're about defining what's acceptable for you and ensuring your well-being. As Brené Brown wisely said, daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves, even when we risk disappointing others. When you set boundaries, you're not being unkind. You're simply asserting that your needs matter too. The first step in setting boundaries is identifying your limits. What are the things that drain you, frustrate you, or make you feel uncomfortable? It could be something as simple as needing alone time after work, not answering calls after a certain hour, or saying no to last-minute plans. Boundaries can also apply to emotional situations, like not engaging in certain conversations or choosing not to be a sounding board for someone's endless complaints. The key is to recognize what makes you feel overwhelmed or compromised and take steps to protect yourself. Once you've identified your boundaries, the next challenge is communicating them clearly and without apology. Many of us have the habit of over-explaining or apologizing when we set a boundary. We feel the need to justify our decision as if it's something wrong or unreasonable. But here's the truth. You don't owe anyone an elaborate explanation for your limits. No, I can't take that on right now is enough. I need some time to recharge is enough. You can be polite, but you don't need to be apologetic. It's also crucial to recognize that setting boundaries will sometimes make people uncomfortable. That's natural. People who are used to you always being available or accommodating might push back or express disappointment. But remember, their discomfort isn't your responsibility. People who truly respect you will understand that boundaries are necessary for healthy relationships. Those who don't respect your boundaries were likely benefiting from your lack of them. Over time, you'll notice that setting boundaries doesn't just protect your well-being, it improves your relationships. When you're clear about your limits, you can engage with others more authentically and meaningfully. You're not showing up out of obligation or resentment, but because you genuinely want to. And when people know where you stand, there's less room for miscommunication or resentment. In the end, setting boundaries is an act of self-respect. It's about standing up for your needs, honoring your time and energy, and recognizing that you are just as deserving of care and consideration as anyone else. It may take practice, and there may be moments of discomfort, but the reward is invaluable. A life where your kindness is rooted in strength, not sacrifice. Boundaries are not just important, they're essential. They ensure that you're giving from a place of abundance, not depletion. So start setting those boundaries today. Do it confidently without apology and watch how it transforms your life. Lesson 3. Stop over-accommodating others' emotions. One of the most overlooked traps of toxic kindness is over-accommodating other people's emotions. If you've ever found yourself constantly tiptoeing around someone's feelings, trying to keep them happy, or taking responsibility for how they react, you might be falling into this trap. At first glance, this can seem like a kind gesture, a way to show empathy and care. But there's a fine line between supporting someone emotionally and sacrificing your own mental peace in the process. When kindness turns into emotional over-accommodation, it becomes toxic, draining your energy and leaving you feeling like you're always walking on eggshells. It often starts with good intentions. You see someone struggling, upset or frustrated, and you want to help. Maybe you take on the role of the peacemaker in your relationships, always trying to diffuse tension or keep things harmonious. But when you start bending over backward to ensure others are happy, at the expense of your own feelings or comfort, it's a red flag. Over-accommodating can lead to unhealthy dynamics where your emotional needs are consistently sidelined for the sake of someone else's. The problem is that when we over-accommodate others' emotions, we teach them that their feelings are more important than our boundaries. This creates a one-sided relationship where you're constantly expected to be the emotional caretaker. It can lead to resentment because while you're giving so much of yourself to keep them content, you're also neglecting your own needs. And here's the kicker. No matter how much you give, you can never control how someone else feels. Their emotions are their responsibility, not yours. To break free from this trap, it's essential to recognize that you are not responsible for managing anyone else's emotional state. Yes, it's important to be kind, empathetic, and supportive, but not at the cost of your own emotional well-being. Emotional support is not about fixing someone's feelings or making sure they're always happy. It's about being there when it's appropriate, offering empathy, but also knowing when to step back and let them handle their own emotional processes. The next step is learning how to differentiate between empathy and over-accommodation. Empathy allows you to connect with others, understand their feelings, and offer support when needed. Over-accommodation, on the other hand, makes you feel as if you need to fix or soften everything for them. One way to avoid falling into this trap is by practicing emotional detachment, not in a cold or uncaring way, but by creating a healthy distance where you can feel empathy without feeling the weight of responsibility for someone else's emotional state. It's okay to care without letting their feelings dictate your actions. Another key point is learning to hold space for your own emotions in these situations. Over-accommodators often suppress their feelings to make room for others. You might downplay your own discomfort, irritation, or exhaustion to avoid making things worse for the other person. But over time, this emotional suppression takes a toll, leading to internal stress and resentment. You deserve to express your feelings too, and setting limits on how much emotional labor you're willing to take on is not selfish, it's necessary. It's also crucial to recognize when someone is using their emotions to manipulate or control you. Emotional manipulation can be subtle, and often it shows up in the form of guilt tripping, playing the victim, or being overly dependent on your emotional support. If you feel like someone is constantly relying on you to make them feel better, or is using their emotions to make you feel guilty for setting boundaries, it's a sign that the dynamic is unhealthy. At the end of the day, the most powerful thing you can do is to let go of the belief that you are responsible for other people's emotional well-being. Their emotions belong to them, and yours belong to you. By respecting your own emotional boundaries, you can show up as a more authentic, balanced version of yourself, offering support from a place of strength rather than sacrifice. It's time to stop carrying the emotional burdens of others and start honoring your own emotional health. Lesson 4. Don't confuse sacrifice with kindness. One of the most deeply ingrained misconceptions about kindness is the idea that it requires sacrifice. We often believe that in order to be truly kind, we must put others' needs ahead of our own, even to the point of our own detriment. But here's the truth. Kindness doesn't require self-sacrifice. When you constantly sacrifice your own needs, desires, and well-being for the sake of others, you're not being kind. You're setting yourself up for burnout, resentment, and emotional depletion. Think about how often you've gone out of your way to help someone, even when it came at a personal cost. Maybe you've cancelled plans you were looking forward to because someone needed you. Perhaps you've given up your free time to help a friend move or taken on extra work at the office to cover for a colleague. In the short term, these sacrifices might feel noble, like you're being a good person. But when acts of kindness regularly come at the expense of your own well-being, you start to lose yourself in the process. Kindness should never come from a place of self-neglect. If you're constantly giving without replenishing your own energy, you'll eventually run dry. Imagine your emotional resources as a well. If you keep drawing water from it without ever filling it back up, it's going to empty. And when you're operating from an empty well, you're not able to show up as your best self for others or for yourself. True kindness comes from a place of abundance, not scarcity. It's about giving because you genuinely want to, not because you feel obligated or guilty. The key to breaking free from the sacrifice mindset is learning to prioritize your own needs without feeling guilty. It's not selfish to take care of yourself, it's necessary. In fact, when you take care of your own well-being, you're better equipped to help others in a way that's sustainable and healthy. As the saying goes, you can't pour from an empty cup. Self-care and kindness go hand in hand. You can be kind without sacrificing yourself in the process. It's also important to recognize the difference between being helpful and being a martyr. A helpful person offers support when they can, within their limits. A martyr, on the other hand, goes above and beyond, often to the point of self-harm, and then feels resentful or unappreciated when their sacrifice isn't acknowledged. If you find yourself feeling bitter after an act of kindness, that's a sign you've crossed the line into martyrdom. True kindness is given freely, without expectation of return or recognition. Another hidden trap of sacrifice is that it can lead to unhealthy relationship dynamics. When you constantly sacrifice for others, it can create a power imbalance where the other person comes to expect that you'll always put their needs first. This can lead to feelings of being taken for granted or even being manipulated. By setting boundaries and refusing to sacrifice your own well-being, you send a message that your time, energy, and needs are just as important as anyone else's. Breaking free from the sacrifice mindset also requires shifting how you view kindness. Many of us grew up with the belief that kindness means always saying yes, always being available, and always putting others first. But kindness doesn't mean self-abandonment. It means showing compassion and empathy without losing yourself in the process. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is to say no or set a boundary. By doing so, you model healthy behavior and teach others that it's okay to prioritize their own needs too. In the end, the most sustainable form of kindness is one that nurtures both the giver and the receiver. It's not about draining yourself dry for the sake of others. It's about offering support in a way that honors your own well-being. When you stop confusing sacrifice with kindness, you'll find that you can give more freely without resentment or burnout. True kindness is rooted in balance, not sacrifice, and it allows you to care for others while also caring for yourself. Kindness can be a beautiful thing, but as we've explored, it has its hidden traps. Learning to say no, setting boundaries, and recognizing when kindness becomes toxic are essential steps in reclaiming your energy and well-being. The key is to be kind without sacrificing yourself in the process. When you master this balance, you'll find that you can show up for others and yourself in a way that's healthier, more sustainable, and more fulfilling. Now that we've uncovered some of the common traps, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever found yourself trapped in toxic kindness? How did you handle it? Drop a comment below and let's keep this conversation going. Your insights might help someone else break free from the same cycle. If you found this journey helpful, make sure to like this post so others can discover it too. And don't forget to subscribe. There's so much more to dive into on the path to a more balanced, empowered life. By joining this community, you'll get practical tips, insightful lessons, and motivational content to help you stay on track. Let's continue this journey together. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next.